Only the second meeting of Parliament's ad hoc committee on the Mkhwanazi allegations, and already we've got fights over documents, last-minute homework, and yes, a postponement. At this rate, the only thing moving fast is the calendar. Stick around to find out why the ad hoc committee has barely gotten started.
Ready to take your podcast to the next level? At Ayeye Studios, you can film, edit, and release your podcast all in one place. From crisp visuals to clean sound, we've got you covered, and we can even distribute your podcast on YouTube and other platforms. The best part? It's brought to you by the same team that brings you SMWX quality. Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Welcome to Ayeye Studios.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. I'm Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and this is the Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh Experience, or SMWX. Right, we've been following the explosive General Mkhwanazi allegations very closely, keeping you up to date with what's happening. And today I want to provide feedback and report on what has been happening in Parliament because, as you know, if you're watching this channel, Parliament has started what is called an ad hoc or a special committee to look into Lt Gen Mkhwanazi's allegations. Now, I did a video covering and summarizing the first meeting of this committee because this is a really important moment. Parliament, which is vested with all this power, is going to look into these allegations of whether criminal syndicates are influencing key spheres of government. And it gives the nation an opportunity to peer into this sordid mix of problematic influences over government. So the people want answers, and Parliament is supposed to provide those answers. So this committee has already sat once, as I said, and in that meeting, effectively, they just started with some early issues. They set out the date for the next meeting, which is the second meeting, and they said that they were going to discuss what's called the draft terms of reference. In other words, a document which guides how this special committee will actually look into this process. Of course, you need to know what's the scope of the inquiry, when is it going to be happening, what is the format of the inquiry, will it be public, will it be open, etc. So that document that kind of guides the whole process. So the meeting that happened yesterday is one about the terms of reference, because we were supposed to get all these submissions from different political parties with their views on the terms of reference so that in this meeting, parliamentarians could define and finally decide the terms of reference. And then they could move forward to setting the agenda, calling the people who are going to provide evidence and testimony, etc. But unfortunately, that didn't quite materialize in this meeting. So in the rest of this episode, I'm going to break down what happened in the meeting, why it's important for you so that you can stay up to date, and show you how effectively it got postponed, largely because things just didn't quite come together in the most competent way. So meeting started with some preliminary matters. As we know, there's been a lot of controversy around whether this committee should have an ANC chairperson. Soviet Lekanyane is the chairperson, ANC, of this committee. He convened the meeting. And already there was some late coming. Some people were at other engagements. Kusela Sangoni, MP, arrived late. She was at another engagement in Limpopo. Julius Malema arrived like halfway through the meeting. So it was already kind of different to the last one. It was on Zoom. Why is Parliament always like you're trying to explain to your grandmother how to use WhatsApp? Like, parliamentarians just cannot get Zoom, and then someone's camera comes on, and then anyway. So there was all that, right? By the way, MPs, like, we're paying them all this money, and then it's all like via correspondence. Yay! To be an MP is like you're studying at UNISA these days. You must go to Parliament, guys. Like, these Zoom meetings started in COVID, but anyway. Okay. So, and shout out to UNISA, perfectly credible institution where I recently got my LLB. So no shame, no shade on them. But Parliament is an in-person institution, surely at this point. Okay, so anyway, parliamentarians are meeting. Some people are coming late, etc. But we're starting to kick off. And it appears that the first problem is that when we're going through the scope of the inquiry, it emerges that the documents which were supposed to have been sent in and collated so that the committee could refer to all the different political party submissions on what these terms of reference should be, the documents didn't quite come through. So let's look at the confusion that emerged around these documents. Here's the ANC's Kusela Sangoni.
Honorable Chairperson, I know that you had proposed an approach, but I think it's very difficult for us to follow without having sight of the presentations. I don't want to take us back, but I would have thought that perhaps if we had all of these additions, amendments incorporated into this report, then we could have a discussion on the basis of whether we are accepting an addition or not as a committee. I'm not sure now when we come to discussions at the end how we will be able to fully refer.
So as you can hear from ANC MP Kusela Diko, there are some problems about the submissions, the documents. Not all the MPs have them. They can't quite see them. And before they rush ahead with the terms of reference, these MPs want all the documents to be visible and observable. This was a theme of this meeting. And it's actually kind of sad because these Mkhwanazi allegations are so urgent, and yet Parliament is like faffing around with documents for hours. So we then finally get Parliament's own secretariat to start, or an internal parliamentary official to start speaking about the scope of the inquiry. And let's see how that part unfolded.
The scope of the inquiry in the main is based on the media briefing of the 6th of July, 2025. I want to repeat that, Chairperson, because we've tried to capture all the allegations which Lieutenant Mkhwanazi raised on the day. And then, Chairperson, of course, at paragraph 5, we speak about the format of the inquiry. And I think an important point that we make there, Chairperson, is that this is not a court of law. These proceedings are inquisitorial.
So that's Parliament effectively walking MPs through, and you can stop the video if you want to read some of those early draft terms of reference in this very early form. So Parliament was talking through these various things, but then it emerges that no, in fact, the submissions again are not fully collated, and we're working off some version of a document that's not the right version of the document. So effectively what then happens is that a debate ensues about, okay, should we now look at the documents of the DA separately and then the EFF separately, etc., or should we take all the submissions, put them into one document and rattle them off in one place? Yes, this is what the committee was discussing for a very long time. So have a look at how this squabble about which documents and what format should work and how the format should work went. Here's the DA's Glynis Breitenbach.
Yes, please, with your permission, and my apology to just intervene like that. Like the other members, I had my hand up. Now, let me tell you what is becoming a problem, Chair, which is a problem that, the concern that has been raised both by Honorable Malema and Honorable Diana Bernard, both the EFF and the DA. I agree fully with them. You see now the document that is being put on the screen is a document that was submitted by the DA. It's not the main document through which the input of various parties are integrated.
So believe it or not, there were actually some substantive questions that the committee engaged with on these terms of reference. One of them was the extent to which this committee has investigative powers. Now, committees like this are quite a strange legal creature because on the one hand, they perform something of an inquisitorial role. In other words, not only is evidence being presented, but also the committee itself is able to ask questions of those who present that evidence, kind of like we saw with the Mkhwebane impeachment committee. So it's not as if there's a judge somewhere separately. The parliamentarians themselves are both inquiring, but also part of the fact-finding at the same time. So the question is, to what extent does that kind of body, which is also not a judicial body, or an executive functionary like the police or something, have the capacity to do its own investigations? Or should it simply rely on the existing evidence that is out there right now and the testimony on that evidence? Or should it go further than that and perform further investigative functions? But these conversations are still quite early and preliminary. They center around Section 55(2) of the Constitution, which really vests Parliament with the power to scrutinize and oversee the executive. So the ultimate debate will center around scrutiny and oversight, and the extent to which that could also include some kind of investigative capacity. So that's an interesting constitutional debate that's arising, but it's arising relatively early at this moment, and it hasn't been solved or answered yet. But what also happened was a question about whether Parliament should employ external legal practitioners for any investigative work or legal work, or whether it should rely on Parliament's own legal practitioners. And it was ultimately decided that Parliament's own legal practitioners would be sufficient. Let's take a look at Kusela Diko on this again.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I'm not seeing our input on the screen. I'm not sure if it is coming, but in essence, the input of the ANC with regards to this matter, oh, there it is that we were arguing, why is there a need to utilize external legal counsel when Parliament has legal counsel located in the Constitutional and Legal Services Office of the National Assembly? I think it may have been a discussion that also ensued earlier this morning. Our view, and also taking from what was deposited by the Economic Freedom Fighters, Honorable Malema, in our first meeting, is that we should not be seeking to utilize resources unnecessarily when we do have those resources in-house.
So there were those questions as well, but the documents struck back and reclaimed the meeting, because just as we thought we were ready to look at these draft terms of reference, it occurred and it emerged that Action SA and MK Party had only just emailed their documents to the committee while they were sitting. So suddenly the chair then says, oh, by the way, we've now only received these submissions, so now we need to add these new submissions. Now, I don't know why Action SA and MK Party had not submitted these documents before, whether they existed and they didn't send them, or they had only finished them now, but clearly that's a late submission, and it took the committee right back to square one. Let's have a look at that moment.
We have gone through the submission of the members of the parties that are represented in the ad hoc committee. There are outstanding submissions of the MK Party and the Action SA. So those submissions would have to be factored in the way each party has proposed. And it has been a long day. Of course, we had incipient challenges. I'm going to suggest that we adjourn now.
Yes, it had been a long day for Parliament, a long day formatting documents. Well, we still had some further twists in the tail, because in addition to these late submissions that mean that we're only going to finalize the terms of reference at the next meeting now, there was a question about whether the draft program could actually be discussed if there are no terms of reference. And Julius Malema and Glynis Breitenbach, EFF and DA, actually agreed that that couldn't happen. So let's watch this last moment on the way forward.
Honorable Malema.
No, thanks. I agree with everything, and the need to start the inquiry much earlier. The quicker, the better. But we cannot come up with a date of the first inquiry without the document we're dealing with. So we're going to be like projected as if we don't know what we're doing. The inquiry is starting, yet terms of reference have not yet been adopted. Because it's not given that when we meet next week on terms of reference, we're going to agree and then immediately start the inquiry. We must agree first on terms of reference so that when we agree on a date of the inquiry, we know we are guided by a document we all accepted. So the sooner we start, the better, but first thing first, so that we don't look like mediocre. Thanks.
Honorable
Chairperson, Honorable.
Thank you, Chairperson. May I suggest, Chair, that you give some thought to perhaps circulating the document that you're going to be sending to us also to the Parliamentary Legal Services so that they can have sufficient upfront time.
Sometimes it gets a bit disheartening to realize that we spend all this time on elections in order to elect people to Parliament to represent South Africans, and when an urgent ad hoc committee is called and the country wants answers, we've spent hours and hours discussing document formatting, and the meeting has had to be postponed. So it wasn't a very good day for the ad hoc committee into the Mkhwanazi allegations, and let's hope this is not a sign of things to come, because this is a really important committee that's going to be doing really important work, and it really needs to move with urgency and speed. That's what South Africans are hoping for. This was a hurdle, but hopefully the terms of reference can now finally be finalized, and we can get on to the business of hearing from the key witnesses who we all want to hear from, and watching parliamentarians scrutinize and oversee the executive by asking the critical questions about who's influenced, how these syndicates are working, and how much veracity there is to Lt Gen Mkhwanazi's earth-shattering allegations. Thank you for watching another episode of SMWX. I want to give a shout out to Otsile Nkadimeng, who helped me with the research on this episode, wading through 4 hours of document formatting in Parliament. So shout out to him. Shout out to my producer, Oratile, Kekana. Shout out to the grand director of this episode, Faizan Adhoc. It's great to be with you all again. Fam, we got 1 million views for one of our episodes, Prince Mashele. We are hurtling towards 300,000 subscribers. And that's all because you continue to show this show love and support. We send it right back to you. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you keep it locked on SMWX. See you on the next one. Aye.